It's the Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Hello and welcome back to the Happy Families podcast. This is Dr. Justin Coulson, continuing our conversation from yesterday with Associate Professor Katie Davis from the University of Washington Information School. If you missed yesterday's conversation, please go back and have a listen to that before you listen to today's discussion because, well, today is a continuation of what we were talking about. Katie, I'd like to kick off today's continued conversation by hitting you with a lightning round straight up. Can we get your brain going really fast?
Sure, let's do it.
So a lightning round, one or two word or one or two sentence answers. We're going to move really, really quickly. What was your favorite TV show when you were young?
Oh, I guess Full House. That's dating me.
Yeah, and I was about to say, I used to watch that too, which is terribly awful for me to date myself. Do you ever not be the calm psychology mum, the screen expert? Do you ever not be the calm mum when it comes to you and your one son, 6-year-old Oliver?
Oh, absolutely. So it's just Oliver and me at home. And I have a pretty demanding job. So I am often extremely tired. And sometimes I'm trying as much as I can to make sure that he's engaging with technology in all the ways that I know are supportive of his development. But sometimes I'm exhausted or sometimes he's exhausted. And it's just okay to sit in front of the TV and veg out a little bit, especially when one or both of us is sick, then all bets are off and screen time is unlimited.
Even though he is the son of an associate professor of psychology who knows this stuff inside and out and has written the book, does he ever just lose it and say, but I just want my screen, I don't care about the psychological theory?
Yeah, it's really funny how he doesn't seem to really believe that I know what I'm talking about when I say, it's time to turn it off. Or especially what he really hates is when he complains that he's bored. And I say, you know what? Boredom is great. That's the way you develop your ability to regulate your emotions and figure out what you're going to do next. You're developing all sorts of resilience that way. And he's very unimpressed by that.
I can imagine. What is the biggest screen challenge that you have as an expert in technology use across the lifespan?
Right now with my 6-year-old, it's pretty much time. I think he's really obsessed with Pokemon right now, and all of his friends are also equally obsessed. And I allow him to watch 2 Pokemon episodes a day. And he really struggles to get me to increase that as much as possible. And this is every day. So even though I don't budge on it, every day it's a bit of a fight and it can get exhausting. But we have a rule in the house where he can watch 2 Pokemon and then he watches 2 programs in German because we just moved back from living for 4 years in Germany. And I want him to keep up his German speaking. So he has to divide his screen time between English and German.
We have a 9-year-old daughter who is excessively engaged with screens and especially Pokemon. And we've actually set the parental lock on the television so it switches off after an hour because otherwise it's amazing when we step in and say, that's enough, it's time to switch it off, or end of the episode, you've got 8 minutes to go. We just have these huge tantrums. But when the TV switches itself off because the screen time is up, she just sort of gets up off her couch and...
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, no, it's incredible. Some of my colleagues at the University of Washington wrote a paper where they found that tantrums in the house substantially decrease when Alexa intervenes. So instead of a parent saying it's time to turn off the TV or turn off your tablet, if Alexa says time is up or some other conversational agent, then the kids all of a sudden say, okay, Alexa says so I'll turn it off. It's really, it's a little bit disconcerting.
Yeah, they intuitively know that Alexa is not going to budge, whereas parents might.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
I want to switch that question up and now ask you, what's your biggest screen challenge for you as an adult, as an expert in the lifespan development and technology use?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that because that's the thing. Adults are struggling just as much as kids, and our kids are seeing us struggle. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to own our struggles and not just sort of become embarrassed and put them aside, but lean into them and share these struggles with our kids. So with me, I definitely struggle. I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I'm always checking my email, and I have this compulsion to respond to emails quite quickly, and whether it's on my phone or my computer. And Oliver certainly calls me on that if we're playing Pokemon, which I admit I'm not always super engaged with.
I
find my eyes wandering to my phone a lot. But when I do, I try to catch myself and call attention and say, oh, you know what, Oliver? These phones are designed to really hook us, and it can actually develop into a good teachable moment, especially as he gets older. So a lot of my research focuses on older tweens and teens. And as their thinking gets more sophisticated, they're able to really understand how, if you talk to them about how these devices and applications are specifically designed to hold our attention, that can be a really fruitful conversation, because then it's not all on us. It's not just we are weak because we are succumbing to these social media apps or the phone notifications, but actually, you know what? They're designed specifically for that purpose. So those kinds of conversations, I really encourage parents to engage their kids around.
I love everything that you've shared there about that. Thank you for that offering. When I look at the impact that technology has on our children, our adolescents, and even on us, I think it's hard to make an argument that the impact isn't becoming increasingly concerning over time as technology becomes increasingly pervasive and integrated into our lives. I'd like to spend the last part of our conversation talking about two areas that this is particularly the case for, mainly for adolescents, although younger children are involved as well. Those two areas are gaming and social media. So if I can start with something, I am going to read to you for just a sec, if I can, from your book, Technology's Child. You've said, interactivity, low cost of failure, clear and immediate feedback, an optimal balance between challenge and frustration, and social interaction. These are the things that video games can offer children. When I read that, it reminded me so much of everything that's in my new book, The Parenting Revolution, about children and their basic psychological needs. That's a really dense sentence that I read with many, many parts to it. Can you explain, from all of your research, what you're really seeing happen when kids are engaging with games online and how that's affecting their psychology?
Right. So all of those qualities that you just read out, as you were reading them, I thought, oh, I wish that school were more like that,
Oh, totally, yeah.
If only it were that engaging for kids. And unfortunately, it isn't. But one thing that games really get right, and it's the reason why kids and adults keep playing and playing, is that they're just a little bit too hard to be completely successful all the time, but not so hard that you become so frustrated that you abandon it. And often school is the complete opposite. It's either too easy or it's way too hard, and either one of those will disengage kids. But video games hit that sweet spot of being just hard enough but not too hard. They give very clear feedback. All of the things that keep us engaged, video games have nailed, and they just know how to do it. And so for that reason, they're extremely compelling. Also for that reason is why I'm really delaying the time when I introduce my son to video games. Not because I'm anti-video game by any means. I think there's a lot of great opportunities, learning opportunities. There are games that support exercise, well-being, all sorts of different kinds of learning, lots of research showing benefits of games. But however, they are so compelling. I don't want to say addictive, because research is conflicted about whether or not we can use that term.
Yeah, psychologists get pretty cranky about the term addiction, don't they?
They do.
Yeah.
That's a very polarizing word.
Yes.
But I think it's pretty safe to say they're very compelling. And for many kids, it's really difficult to find a balance. And so for me, I'm just trying to avoid it entirely until Oliver is a little bit older. And then we're going to have to really do a lot of hard work of trying to get that balance right. And it's not something I believe that you can actually achieve once and for all and say, okay, I am now engaging with video games in a balanced way. It's sort of a daily act that you have to engage in with your children, because it's just too easy to keep playing and playing and playing. And so, yeah, I think that there really is a danger sometimes to let that balance get a little bit out of whack. And so things to keep in mind are here it is really how long has my child been playing this game, and what might they have been doing otherwise if they hadn't been engaged with the game? Because sometimes it might be that there actually wasn't so much great other alternatives for them to do. Maybe they're on a plane and there really isn't any opportunity, or maybe it's raining outside. If you're noticing that there probably could have been some other activities that might be good for them that they could have been engaging in, but instead they're just playing video games over and over again, that's when we're starting to think that maybe the balance needs to be recalibrated.
Yeah, it's that whole and balanced life kind of thing. One of the things that frustrates me with video game research is it doesn't say what I want it to say. I really want video game research to say too much time gaming is bad for you and it'll lead to all sorts of negative outcomes in your life. And no matter how much of it I read, it doesn't. No,
it doesn't say that.
It doesn't tell me that. It says that kids have a great time, that they love it, that it's good for their relationships. There's some cognitive benefit to it. Like, it's so frustrating that there's more advantages than the disadvantages really stem from parent-child conflict, because parents want their kids to go and live a whole and balanced life. And even the violent video game content.
A lot of it does come from that parent-child conflict. A lot of it also does come from, there are young people and adults for whom, if they're playing so much, they're engaged, in video games for most of their day or in a big part of their night. If it's starting to interfere with sleep, if it's starting to interfere with schoolwork or social relationships outside of the game, that's when alarm bells should be going off.
Right.
And there are certainly instances of that. But on the whole, you're right. A lot of the research does show small but positive effects. And then when it comes to violent video games, there's a camp of researchers who are pretty adamant that there's a relationship between violent video games and aggression. And then there's another camp that's pretty adamant that there isn't. I think that there's very little evidence that convinces me that playing violent video games causes kids to become violent. There is research showing that perhaps right after a child plays a violent video game, they're more aroused and perhaps acting in a slightly more aggressive way. That doesn't necessarily mean they become more aggressive, but they certainly are more aroused. But that's a far cry from actually being violent. And so, the research is a little bit murky. And I think it, again, we should come back to how is this affecting my individual child? And here, again, I use this 2-step decision tool to think about, is this self-directed? Are they in control, or is the game more in control? And that's where that question can really help tease apart. Is this something that where it's more likely to go in the direction of the research that shows positive benefits, or more likely to go in the direction of the research showing negative? And then the second question is it community supported? Am I providing support around this experience? Are they engaging with friends while playing games, or family members? There's a lot of opportunity for community support during video games, but then there's also opportunity for bullying and other things. So you want to take a look at what are the social dynamics that are going on during this gameplay. That can be really important. Sometimes
it would be great if research just said what we wanted it to say.
I know.
I'm really compelled by what you've said, though. I'm reading it the same way. Even things like empathy. There's some really cool studies that show that when somebody walks out of playing a violent video game, they may be a little less likely to help somebody in the corridor that needs a hand with something. But it's not like they go out and start beating people up or go and buy small arms and threaten people, rob a bank.
Absolutely.
There's no, which is kind of frustrating. Although I will say, when I was a teenager, I've got to say this, Katie. When I was a teenager, I used to play this car racing game at the local arcade I think it was called Daytona 500 or something like that. And I would leave the arcade and get in my car, and I did drive a little faster on the way home from the arcade as I was driving.
Sure. Yeah, research definitely would support that. But whether that turns you into just someone who's always racing fast in your car, that's less supported.
Yeah, totally. And I would have to say I was erratic for the first few minutes, and then I sort of calmed down and I was just driving like a human again. And I was a young adolescent boy, which probably had something to do with it as well. Katie, the last thing that I just want to touch on, and we have such limited time, is social media. I've been really taken by the research that Jonathan Haidt has been doing. For those who are not familiar with Jonathan Haidt, he's probably one of the world's foremost thinkers in social psychology, and he has been working with Jean Twenge on some really interesting ideas around kids, teenagers, social media. He's got a Substack called After Babel. Katie, have you been watching what Jonathan Haidt has been writing there? And I'd love to get your take on the impact of social media and whether or not, as he's saying, your read of the research is showing that it is a genuine, significant contributor to the mental ill health that so many of our adolescents are struggling with.
Yeah, well, so I have to say, I have been following Jonathan's work and Jean Twenge's work, and they are doing a great job. They have this ongoing document where they're collecting all the research related to teens' social media use and their mental health concerns. And I'm convinced by that research and my own research that there's definitely something going on when it comes to teen social media use and their mental health challenges. It's by no means the sole cause. Whenever you have a mental health challenge or concern, it's multifactorial. There are many factors involved: family relationships, peer relationships, an existing vulnerability towards anxiety or depression. But what I see in my work is that social media often acts as an amplifier of existing challenges or struggles for teens, and it can be a pretty profound amplifier. And so I'm pretty convinced now that, at least in the United States, where we're seeing some pretty alarming rises over the last 10 years in depression and even just persistent feelings of sadness, particularly among teen girls and LGBTQ plus youth. I am convinced that social media is having a role in that, in addition to many factors that are involved in young people's lives right now, not least of which was the pandemic and young people are still experiencing the pandemic and the things that have transpired from it.
Yeah. Katie, we have, during the course of our conversation over the last 2 days, dropped several nuggets in terms of how we can help our children to feel like they have agency, to be self-directed, to have the level of community support that they need, and how we as parents can engage with them and have hard conversations, as you said, in that exhausting day-to-day business of working with kids and their technology use. As much as I'd love to do another 2 episodes talking further about those solutions, what I'm going to do instead is direct people to your book, Technology's Child: Digital Media's Role in the Ages and Stages of Growing Up. It's a book that takes a developmental approach and essentially says, here's what's going on. Kids are little, when they're medium, when they're big, and even when they're grown-ups, in terms of their technology use and what we can do to help them. I found the book immensely helpful. As somebody who has a background in psychology and has been talking about this for a long time, I underlined and made so many notes on what you've written. The science is fantastic, and I just love the way you've made it so accessible for parents. Thank you for your book, and thanks for the conversation.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Katie Davis is an associate professor at the University of Washington Information School and the author of the brand new book, Technology's Child: Digital Media's Role in the Ages and Stages of Growing Up. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. For more information about Technology's Child, you can see the show notes and also check out Katie's website, katiedavisresearch.com. If you go there and sign up for Katie's newsletter, she'll be able to send you a weekly tidbit of research and ideas for how you can manage tech better in your home with your kids. That's katiedavisresearch.com. Sign up for her newsletter there.